I'm gonna call this Samsung S21 FE the unfortunate phone. The phone that will have a brief moment of time in the spotlight and then it will disappear, forgotten forever. And it's a damn shame too, because despite some awkward release timing and pricing issues, it is a good phone. So you guys remember the S20 FE, right? I made a video about that phone and I called it an easy recommendation. Essentially, it had all of the best parts of the much more expensive $1,000 S20 at a much cheaper $699 price tag. The S20 was meant to be a full-on premium flagship, and the price reflected that. It was like $1,000 at launch. With the S21, they dialed it back a little bit. They gave it a plastic back, they didn't add too many new features compared to the previous phone, and they gave it a lower starting price of $799. And that's where it starts to get a little bit awkward. The S21 FE is very similar to the S21. It's different in a few areas here and there, and in some ways it's actually the better phone. But given the fact that the S21 was released a full year ago, the FE just doesn't bring a whole lot more to the table. So let's talk about the differences first, and then I'll talk more about my experience with it. What's different about the FE or Fan Edition version of the S21? Well, for starters, the FE is a slightly bigger phone. We've got a 6.4-inch AMOLED display on the FE versus 6.2 on the regular S21. It still has a 120Hz refresh rate, which has more or less become the standard at this point, and it still has a fairly quick under-display fingerprint reader at the bottom. It's placed a little bit farther down than I'm used to, but I haven't had any trouble with it so far, so it's fine. Around the back of the phone, things have changed there too. Instead of that two-tone coloring that the S21s had, the FE version has more of a uniform look with a bit of silver around the camera lenses. This might be a slightly hot take, maybe just lukewarm, but I actually prefer the look of the FE myself. I didn't love the color options for the S21, and I don't really think the two-tone works all that well. The cameras themselves have changed a little bit too. Now, it's got the same 12 megapixel wide and ultra wide, but that telephoto has been downgraded a little bit from 64 megapixels in the S21 to just 8 megapixels in this FE version. The FE takes some pretty solid pictures overall. Colors are nice and accurate, sharpness is good, and I've actually been very impressed with how well the edge detection is working with the portrait mode. While that telephoto has been downgraded a little, the selfie camera on the FE was actually upgraded, so they kind of traded around a little bit. The FE has a 32 megapixel selfie camera, up from 10 on the S21. The result is, drum roll please, sharper photos. Surprise, surprise. Seriously though, these are great. Selfies aren't really my thing, but if they're yours, you'll be very happy with the front-facing camera. Then there's battery life. The FE also gets an upgrade in that department. It's got a 4,500 milliamp hour battery, up from the S21's 4,000. Now, keep in mind that the FE does have a bigger screen, so while you most likely will get slightly more battery life than, the S21 users, it probably won't be that significant. I can get around 5.5 to like 6 hours of screen on time with the FE, depending on what I'm doing and how heavily I'm taxing the CPU. It's pretty standard affairs for a phone with that size battery. The rest of the internal specs are more or less the same. It's got a Snapdragon 888 5G CPU, 128 or 256 gigs of storage, and the same wireless charging with the same charging speed. The RAM is a bit different. You can either get 6 gigs in the base model or upgrade to 8 gigs if you want the exact same performance that you'd get in the S21. Those are all of the differences between the S21 and the S21 FE. Slightly different cameras, slightly different color schemes, a slightly bigger battery and bigger display, and it costs a little bit less. It's $100 cheaper than the S21 at $699, but I've already seen the S21 drop to that price multiple times throughout the year, so it's just not much of a deal, at least at the time of launch. It's very easy to point fingers at Samsung here and say, you priced this phone wrong, it should have came out 4 months ago. But in this case, I think they're just trying to make the best out of a kind of a bad situation. There were many reports that came out months ago saying that the FE was significantly delayed because of the global chip shortage, and there was even actually speculation that it might be canceled altogether. So the fact that the S21 FE even exists is a bit of a surprise in and of itself. Yes, the timing is bad. It's 2022, and Samsung has effectively just released a slightly updated version of a phone that came out a full year ago. But does that make it a bad phone? No, not by a long shot. I've been using this phone for the past week, and I've been enjoying it. It's running One UI 4 on Android 12, and it feels fast. I have the base model with the 6 gigs of RAM, and despite that, I haven't had any issues with responsiveness. I mean, the Snapdragon 888 is a flagship tier chip, even if it is about a year old now. The display feels as good as most flagship phones too. It's got very slim bezels all the way around, except for the chin, which is like the tiniest amount thicker. And overall, the color and sharpness hangs with the best of them. Even the stereo speakers are pretty solid for watching videos out loud. Some of you might be a little bit disappointed by the plastic back on both the S21 and FE versions, but I've come to like the composite material that Samsung puts on their mid-tier phones. It's soft to the touch, it doesn't feel cheap like you'd expect, and it lightens the phone significantly, which makes it way more comfortable to hold than most glass phones. I'm having a really hard time finding things that I don't like about the S21 FE. Had there been no chip shortage and this was released sometime in, like Q3 or even Q4 for that matter of last year, I think this would have been a really good alternative to the S21 or even some similarly priced phones like the Pixel 6. And to be fair, it's not like timing affects whether this phone is good or not. It doesn't. It doesn't at all. It's just hard to recommend a phone with last year's specs that might be instantly eclipsed as soon as the S22 comes out like next month. That timing really does make the S21 FE kind of a tough sell, and it's unfortunate. Here's what I'll say about it. If you're looking to buy a new phone and the S21 FE piques your interest, just wait a month and see what Samsung does with the S22. If the S22 is an even better phone for around the same amount of money, you'll be glad you waited. And if not, the S21 FE could very well be on sale by then anyway, and you'll get a better deal. Hope you liked the video, thanks for watching, and as always, have a great day.